Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. The late psychiatrist, medical doctor, and psychologist Milton H. Erickson, who was a pioneer in the use of hypnosis, had a saying, and that was neurosis is the inability to communicate directly. I think that very often, even diseases and chronic pain can be forms of indirect communication, that they serve a particular function or combination of functions for a person. And I want to share a personal story about this. A few months ago, my wife had asked me to come with her to a family gathering of sorts that I really didn't want to do for a variety of reasons. It really did not sit well with me. Now, normally, I'm very good at boundaries, having clear boundaries. Um, but in this particular situation, for some reason, I let myself get talked into doing something I kind of resented doing. So the whole deal was that my family or my wife and kids were leaving on a Friday, and I was going to, come join everybody on Saturday. And on the Friday night, I got a splintering headache, like a really, really painful headache. Lasted all throughout the night, and it was so bad that it rendered me incapable of driving. Now, I usually never have headaches unless I'm dehydrated or extremely tired. So this was very unusual for me. And I called my wife. I said, "Look, I have this earth-shattering, horrible headache. I literally can't drive. I can't come." And she was sympathetic with me, but then I said to her, "And I smell a rat." Here's what I'm saying. The headache is absolutely real, and I'm convinced that I'm unconsciously choosing to headache. I'm convinced that I'm generating this headache as a way of saying no because I kind of resent this and I really don't want to do it. So I'm outing myself, and I want you to relate to me the same way you would relate to me if I had just directly said no. And she wasn't that happy about those comments. But a little bit later, I fell asleep. And when I awoke later, I had zero headache whatsoever. Now, of course, a cynic might say, look, these are all just a very, very funky coincidence, and it may be. But I've seen this sort of things with clients so many times over the years that I'm pretty certain that while it would be wrong to say that I consciously chose to have a headache, I still think that it's true in a sense to say that I chose to headache. View headache as a process, the process of headaking. Now, it's not quite the same as, say, choosing to lift my right arm like this and wave at you as a voluntary action. But I still think as an organism, there was an intent and a function, and thereby it is accurate to say that a person can choose to headache. A particular behavior or set of behaviors can be purposeful, goal-oriented, and non-volitional or experienced as non-volitional at the same time. This is something we've really learned, right, by studying hypnosis. So I think one very important aspect of this in terms of both reducing neurotic tendencies, reducing one's chance of coming down with an autoimmune disease or many sorts of diseases is lie less. And I know that this comes across as me completely being devoid of empathy and having no compassion, and as blaming people who are sick and stuff like that. But remember this, the big mistake that's been made in traditional medicine is separating the mind from the body and separating the person or the organism from its cultural surround, and completely ignoring our subjectivity, our sense of meaning, our inner states, what it's like to be us, and also the social norms and expectations and roles and rules that we may be part of. So by thinking a bit bigger, by not just viewing these things as something that exclusively happens to us, but viewing it as a process happening in and around us that we have some part of. By being willing to say no, by being willing to communicate directly, by being authentic, and by that I mean that there's a correspondence between your intentions, your professed values, your state of being, and your actual expressed behaviors. You can reduce your stress levels. Now, your emotional systems are highly connected to part and partial of your immune system, right? So, and consider this too in terms of a symptom being a form of indirect communication. I'll give you a very interesting example of this. Um, One is not mine, it's Jay Haley's. Jay Haley worked with a woman in her early 20s, I think, who had this like paralysis of her right arm. And there was nothing wrong with her. And they did hypnosis, and they could move the paralysis from the right arm to the left arm. They could move it to the right foot or the left foot, but she wouldn't completely let go of it, right? Now, what happened was that she was in a relationship where her husband was supposed to either work or go to school, but he had kind of just dropped out and let her support him. And while she was a very nice person and people pleasing, this kind of riled her up internally, but she never expressed it. So she had these symptoms. Now, what happened was that she got pregnant, and that, in quotation marks, forced the husband to actually get a job and to get active. And as a result of that, the whole symptom disappeared. It no longer served its function. I've seen this so many times in family systems with clients, how symptoms can be sometimes kind of crude, but sometimes kind of sophisticated ways of maintaining boundaries, saying no, attempting to control other people, being significant, not having to deal with certain thoughts or feelings. And sometimes these forms of communication can be more potent and more powerful than verbal utterances or ordinary behaviors. Consider what's called the Resignation Syndrome in Sweden. You have had since the late 90s, I think about 400 documented cases. In recent years, 169. And these are only asylum-seeking children and teenagers. And it's only in Sweden. It's people from the Balkans, Yazidis, Romanians. And what happens is that these teenagers slowly begin to withdraw from the world, and they go into what the doctors called a coma-like state, where they seem completely unresponsive to stimuli, to even to pain. They're being fed through tubes, but simultaneously they have a higher pulse, so their body is kind of like in a stress response, and they stay in these states for months and even years on end. And I remember reading the book by Susanne O'Sullivan, a neurologist, titled The Sleeping Beauties, that goes into this case and other cases, how people would usually ask her, what's going on in the brain of these young people? And her point being that the question you really should ask is, what's going on in their life? This form of communication is probably way more potent than any verbal protest or utterance could ever be. So again, I hope this is thought provoking. I've found it very useful in my own life when I start to do stuff like this to kind of remind myself that I'm choosing to do it and to kind of out myself with the intent to keep myself as honest as I can possibly be. Uh, Once again, know that I see clients from all over the world. So if my thinking resonates with you and you want to see me as a client or for mentoring, you can find me at provocativehypnosis.com. If you want to train with me, I'm doing a live seminar in Iceland just this upcoming week, but the next online course after that to learn the psychological illusion model 2.0 will be the 25th and 26th of March that weekend. You can find that information on the seminar page on provocativehypnosis.com. All right, thanks for listening.